All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. I am very excited today. We have a very impromptu podcast here with Jacob. So this is last minute. Here's how I think we should start because it is so last minute. It's 8 o'clock at night for me. And so, Jacob, we will get into your story and a little bit about who we're talking to, but what are your thoughts on this hustle and grind mentality that we have right now? Since it's 8 o'clock at night, I feel like that's a great way to start and just hear your own thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've definitely been a person who has gotten caught up with the hustle and grind mentality for sure. I think it's lacking a little bit of just gentleness. If you look at the people who are really successful, oftentimes they're not that busy. And I think this whole hustle culture is a little bit of a distraction that's being created. And a lot of it is just empty productivity, really. And I know that from my own journey. The trap that got caught up by myself has been thinking that because I'm busy, that I'm being productive, and thinking that because I'm doing something all of the time, that something is happening in my life. Whereas in reality, a lot of times I was just grinding gears and nothing was happening. So, what are you really focusing on? What are you really doing? What is really moving the needle forwards, as opposed to just constantly doing? And when you do that, when you really focus, then also the power of your yes becomes bigger when you create a big no. When you start saying no to things that are taking out your energy and they don't feel completely aligned or like fully resonancing, raising the vibration of joy in your being, then your yes also becomes so much more potent. Again, something I've learned, I had to let go of quite a lot of jobs to actually be at the place where I'm like only doing the things that I'm enjoying. And it's just, so beautiful.
Yeah, and this is, oh my God, this is about to be a beautiful conversation because I am about to learn so much. I have my notepad ready. Let us get into a little bit about your story, your own journey, because there are so many different layers to it, and you can go as in depth as you'd like here.
Okay, thank you for asking. Thank you for the opportunity to go really deep in that. Um, my story started when I was about 13. I had a chronic illness. I had a skin disease. Basically, my entire face was covered in rashes, and I stopped sleeping at some point because it was just so painful. And my entire body was like, if I went to sleep, I would wake up bleeding just from scratching myself. So there's no better way to enter spirituality than pain. This is my personal experience again, and so many other people that I'm working with. The entrance into the spirituality becomes when something is not functioning and when there's pain or illness or disease or big breakdowns. And for me, that was chronic illness. And I spent more time at doctors than I did in school. When I was about 13, I got into meditation and I read a book that was just briefly mentioning meditation, and I got so interested in it and I started reading everything I could find. I started meditating, and in about 3 months, my skin disease went away. And I was just like, wow, there's something more. There's something that I don't fully understand. And this mystic curiosity came over me, and I dropped out of school and I started diving deep into personal development. And next few years were just Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, everything I could get my hands on. And I just powered my mind and my beliefs, and I implemented things. I put them into action. And when I was about 18 years old, I decided that the country that I grew up in was not big enough for the dreams that I had. So I left and I started really looking for my tribe and my community, which took me on a really intense and dark journey for a couple of years. And I really had to look at myself and all of my shit and like really be with all of the things that were coming up. I went from homeless to being in some really big mansions with really big people. I ended up grinding hospitality jobs just to get some money. And then on the other hand, I ended up like in India, in the ashrams, training with the yogis there. I ended up in the Amazon, learning from the indigenous people, indigenous plant medicine keepers. And yeah, that the journey has been really, really interesting and really intense.
Yeah, there are just so many layers to you. And so even just hearing your story, I'd love to hear from your perspective with the amount of people that you have come in contact with and building your own tribe and look and just really seeing so many different parts of the world, what is holding people back right now?
Right now, it's an interesting question because I don't think it's a very one-layered answer. I don't think there's one answer to that. I think there's the aspect where we find comfort in which we can hide is where I find majority of the people staying the same or just slowly going backwards in their evolution. And let me just explain what I mean by that. It's not one-off answer. I can't say like a lot of people get stuck in the way that they're not taking care of their body or that they're not doing enough of like the productivity stuff. It's more so that people get caught in the thing that becomes comfortable to the extent that they stop expanding and they stop pushing their edges. And even what is a hell, even what is painful, even what is hard, even what is destructive can still be comfortable and familiar. And we call that familiar hell versus the unfamiliar heaven. And in order to get something that's different than what you got, you have to do something that you haven't done. And the distinction here is that no practice on its own is something that will save you, right? I'm sure in a bit we're going to go into somatics and talking about working with the body, but I know that like when we go really deep in the therapies and working with the trauma, with the root causes of addiction and stuff like that, the somatics in itself, they can be a really powerful tool because they bring up a lot of the stuff. They bring up like really like, the darkest, the deepest parts of our psyche. However, if we just keep doing that, that can also, as uncomfortable as it is, it can also become quite addictive and destructive. As helpful as it is in a therapeutic sense, it's still not very action oriented. It's not outward oriented. And on the same side, on the other side of the spectrum, right, we've got like very much like change your mindset, take action. Your life is going to change as soon as you start like doing this and this and this. And it's very like action based and action oriented, and that shit works too. However, on the other hand, if we don't look at the deepest parts of our being, then we're just bypassing a lot of depth. And at some point, these deeper parts will come out, will end up sabotaging where we're at. So it's not a one layered answer because I feel like where somebody is hiding, this is where their growth can be. And where people start getting stuck is when they believe that one modality is what's going to save them, because it's still giving a lot of power outwards. Even if that modality is really good, it's still something that is like outside of themselves.
Yes. So when I'm looking at this, like so many people that are, even myself included, that are going through this storm right now and they don't see that other side, how are you able to explore those deeper parts when you're going through that storm and can't necessarily see the other side?
Oof. Yeah, you have to have faith that there is stuff on the other side. When I was homeless, when I spent a couple of months in France, homeless, and that was the period where I didn't think things are ever going to get better. I didn't know how they could ever get better. I had so much resentment in my body towards my family that I just refused to go home. And I said, like, anything is better than going home. And I spent months and months in depths of darkness, really, just being in the streets. And like it rained, and I remember the moments where it rained on me and I was just covering myself and I was asking myself, what the fuck? Sorry, what am I doing here? And yeah, in those moments, I really could not see that there's something on the other side. However, it was the faith in something bigger than me that really allowed me to believe that I am meant for something more. So if you don't see how to get on the other side, if you're so deep in the storm, just learn to lean into trust that everything is going to be okay. And there is something on the other side. And that's where mentorship can come in. And that's where also a lot of faith can come in and a lot of prayer.
See, this is I'm doing my best to get more vulnerable on my own podcast here. I'm vulnerable with the people that I feel safest with, but in terms of a platform, I'm not. And so I'm trying to share more parts of myself. And so when I look at this, my biggest struggle right now is because I know that other people will be going through something similar to me. I have a difficulty finding faith, right? I have a difficulty trusting in faith because I don't know what it looks like. And it feels at times that it hasn't worked for me just yet. And so that's where my question becomes of how do I continue to have that faith and trust, even though I believe that it's there, but I don't know that it's there.
Yeah, faith is a multi-layered topic again, and I just want to clarify for the listeners. When I say faith, for me, that's faith in God, and it can be faith in the universe, faith in the divine. It doesn't have the exact same name. We're not trying to follow here a structured religion. Where I'm going with this is I don't think you don't have faith. I think you have a lot of faith. I think you just haven't fully figured out what do you have faith in. And let me ask you a question.
Hmm.
If you stand on top of a cliff and you're overlooking the canyon, and there's like a 2 kilometer drop, would you just be open to like walk off the cliff?
No,
Why not?
because I believe I would get hurt or die.
Right. So you believe that you would fall. You
Yes.
believe in gravity, right?
Yes.
Do you fully understand the intricacies of gravity?
No.
Exactly. So if I tell you to put a fork into a light socket, this is a metaphor that
Hmm.
is coming from one of my business partners and really close brother. He always asks that when he talks about faith. Would you put a fork into a light socket, an
No.
electricity? No, you wouldn't, because you believe in electricity, right? But can you see electricity, and do you know all the intricacies of electricity?
Mm. No.
So in the same way, if I tell you that if you pray, not praying asking for something, but coming from a place of already being grateful for what is already there, if I tell you that every single time as you turn the focus into gratitude for what you already have, things clear up for you, and you will attract more of the same.
Mm.
Where is the blockage in that? Because I find that to be a similar thing.
Hmm. So what's difficult for me, and I love that I'm just going to be able to share things here, is I feel grateful when I focus on it, but after I don't focus on it, I don't feel as grateful like throughout the rest of the day for it. And I think that that's common for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're very much into fitness, right?
mhm.
And how did you build your muscles?
um, through diet and training,
And how often do you train?
4 or 5 days a week.
Right. 4 or 5 days a week. So if I tell you that gratitude and mindset are a muscle and that you have to train it 4 or 5 times a day or 4 or 5 times an hour
Hmm.
in order to get the same result that you're getting from working out, this is the distinction that I feel like majority of the people don't understand. And that's the concept of what I was sharing earlier as well, where we get into the place that's feeling comfortable. And I see that even in when I started leading psychedelic retreats, and I would see people would come reaching for more plant medicine and like grasping for more of this catalytic transformation. And um catharsis is really good, and it's really powerful, and it's really potent, and the transformation that comes through psychedelics is really, really potent. And at some point when we start reaching for more, instead of integrating it, instead of putting it into action, instead of building a muscle, it just becomes another escape. So it's easy to hide in a place where we say that we're doing the work just because we do our gratitude practice once a day, but doing the work is actually doing it every single hour, few times an hour, few times a day, and really making sure that we rewire our brain in the way that we talk to ourselves, in the way that we see the world. And in this, I can go really deep into that
Hmm.
topic, but for me, this was coming through the studies of cognitive behavior therapy, where I would see that the way I speak to myself, the way I think, is directly navigating the way my life is reflecting it. So when I would speak to myself in the way, and again, coming back to my time being homeless in France, I went into the spaces where I was thinking like, nothing is ever going to change. I'm not good enough. None of this is worth anything. I should just end it all. And as I was catching myself in these the darkest parts of my psyche, I realized that nobody is coming to save me. Nobody's going to come and change my mind for me. So what I had to do is take it, take the words that I'm saying, and change them over and over and over again. And I spent countless hours per day, even like sometimes 2, 3 hours a day, just being with my journal and writing down the things that were happening in my head, really flushing out all the beliefs that were there, and then challenging them. Why is this not true? How could the opposite also be true? I had a belief because I come from a poor family that I could never be successful or wealthy. And now I'm living the life that I've been wanting to live since I was a teenager. I'm around really amazing people in really beautiful circles. And I had this belief that I could never have that because I come from a poor family, from a poor place, because I am not super talented in something, or um, all these thoughts that were coming up for me. So I started looking for evidence of why that's not true. How can the opposite also be true? When I caught myself thinking I am not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, when I started getting in those spirals, I just chose to constantly tell myself the opposite of that. Actually, I'm learning to love myself more. I'm learning to appreciate more of myself. I'm learning to see myself more. I love you. I see you. I would do a lot of mirror work, just looking at the mirror and telling myself like all of these things. But it didn't happen just at doing a gratitude practice in the morning or in the evening. It was something I eventually ended up becoming. So it was spending hours and hours a day talking to myself in a different way. And it might feel overwhelming to think that you need to spend hours and hours talking to yourself in a different way, or being constantly present with how you speak to yourself and how you think and how you feel. However, the results and the outcomes are so much sharpness and focus, so much joy, so much clarity, so much beauty, that eventually you get your entire life when you put in the work.
Yeah. So what I'm here, like the biggest thing is just the repetition over repetition over repetition. And even when you don't necessarily believe it right yet you're conditioning and rewiring your brain to believe it. That's what I'm hearing, right?
That's
So from this, like this is just like a small modality that you can take and apply today. And so what are some of these other modalities that you've started to utilize as well? I've got the cognitive behavioral therapy, NLP, breath work, like all of these are intertwined. And so how did you start to utilize things like the breath work and NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy in yourself and then in people as well?
Yeah, as I've said, when I was about 15, I dove really deep into personal development, and I didn't have a lot of language for what I was learning. A lot of the things I was learning was I was reading books. I'm not a native English speaker, as you can tell by my accent, and a lot of the books that I was reading, I wasn't 100% fully understanding what was there. Like my English grew over time, so I went from like maybe 50% understanding to 100 over time. However, I know that there's a lot of terminology that got lost in those initial few years. So I was learning the concepts, but I wasn't fully understanding the terminology of it. So I actually learned a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy by studying a lot of books on psychology, and I didn't have the right wording for it. However, what I was doing was I would just take the concept of it and I would apply it. So one thing that I've already said is challenging beliefs, appreciative inquiry, right? Gratitude journaling, all of that is coming through cognitive behavioral therapy. So I started doing that for myself over and over again and seeing what was working for me. And then over time, eventually I got into neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which is like an operating system for the mind. And that was more something that I took on to really be able to understand how we use the language in order to create certain neural pathways, and how we can change our mind about anything by changing our language and how we speak to ourselves. And this is something that I found very useful to work with clients, because I can challenge them even without like specifically challenging them. So, for example, a few days ago, I was having a call with a client, and they were telling me about the depression. They were saying that there's, depressive thoughts, and they said, I am feeling depressed, or I am depressed, or something along those lines. And instead of going along with this story, from neurolinguistic programming, you just change a little bit of language. And I asked them, when have you learned how to do depression so well? And this is changing from being the identity of being depressed to depression being a habit that is learned. So as I asked the question of how did you learn to do depression so well, just in their mind, it already switched into like, oh, I'm actually really good at doing something. Like I've really learned this one thing well. So if I can learn this one thing well, then I can learn the opposite as well. So it's switching that. So my second modality that I really got deep into was neurolinguistic programming. And then over time, spending a lot of time in yoga and in psychedelics, breathwork just naturally happened. And I spent maybe 2 years doing Wim Hof method every single morning. That was like a very rigorous practice that I've had for myself. And then I spent 90 days doing holotropic breathwork by myself every morning, which is a much more intense and much longer practice. And I've just noticed how when we look at everything a little bit more holistically, when we intertwined all these methodologies, they end up going so much deeper. And it can be really overwhelming to think of like, oh, here's IFS and somatics and NLP and CBT and all of that stuff. However, where I'm wanting to go with this is when you really see what works for you, you don't need to understand the entire system. You can model people who have already been in a certain thing. You put on that hat for just a little bit, and you see this either works for me or it doesn't. And that's been my journey with all of these modalities. Like I put on a certain hat, I tried it for a while, and I decided breathwork works for me. Neurolinguistic programming works for me, internal family systems work for me. So I started learning all of these different things through embodying them over time.
So when I look at something like depression or alcohol, and we identify with these things and we take them on for ourselves, not necessarily why did they happen? Like why do we take on all of that and identify with it? But why is it so difficult for us to unidentify with it?
Yeah, in ontological coaching, there's the belief that you've created your environment in order to support your identity. So who you be, who you are, then gets reaffirmed by your entire environment. So an example of that is if I see myself as somebody who's always playing somewhat of a victim role, right? And I'm always asking my friends for advice, and I'm always, when they give me advice, I don't take it. And then I end up playing more of like these victim things. So I've created this version of myself that's then further reinforced by the people around me. So if I change who I want to be, then the environment suddenly starts working against me, because environment wants to create a homeostasis. It wants to keep things to stay the same, right? So
Mhm.
suddenly I'm different, but the environment is the same. So then the environment starts forcing you back into being who you were. And that's where a lot of people, I feel like, fail at changing, is because they end up going to the same people and they end up having the same conversations. And they're same people accept the same behavior from them. So even if it's not fully spoken, there's the expectation of you give me this and I give you that. And this transactionality in certain interactions is a lot of times what holds the identity in place. So that's one thing, it's the environment. Then secondly is that mind wants things to stay the same, and mind is looking for what is familiar. So even though that your behavior or behaviors, whether that's like addiction or you said alcohol or whatever that is, um, even when you see that this isn't working for you, it is still familiar. And unless you look at all the deeper layers behind that, then that doesn't fully clear on its own. So there needs to be like the desire to either one, go into something that's completely unfamiliar, take it on completely and let yourself be in that discomfort for long enough, or to really go into the root of the issue and start changing it from there. But the mind will always choose the familiar hell over unfamiliar heaven. Anything that is familiar is what we attach to. So oftentimes that's behaviors, and oftentimes that's identity.
Mm. So when someone's environment is helping reinforce this identity that they've created, and they, I'll say, can't necessarily get out of it in as quickly as they want to, is it possible for you to go and make all of those identity shifts and view yourself differently, and then your environment will change? Or you need to go and change your environment, and then that will allow you to make those identity shifts that you're looking for?
Yeah, again, in my case, I switched my environment so often because I found how the hooks of previous relationships that I was associating with were holding me in a stuck identity that I didn't want anymore. So it can be very supportive if you can change your environment, for sure. And if you don't, I feel like once you do change your identity, your environment will automatically change as well. So you can see that if, again, coming to back to addiction and drinking, I stopped drinking when I was 21 years old, and I had a pretty good streak, not that long, but as I decided to stop drinking, I noticed that I could not have the same conversation with the same people. I could not be around people who would just be mindlessly drinking, 2, 3 times a week. It's not who I wanted to surround myself with. And it actually became so intolerable to be dishonoring myself in this way that I just could not be around these people. So a lot of my friendships started slowly falling away. When I changed how I want to communicate and the standard that I hold myself to, it became intolerable to be in conversations with people who would still hold me to who I used to be. And it just naturally, all those friendships fell away. And elevation requires separation. It always takes a little bit of time before, when you start growing, the environment matches you. And at first, it might feel lonely and it might feel uncomfortable. However, what's on the other side of that is something so profound, because when the environment does start matching that identity, then all of the things will start falling into place. But you need to clear the old first to make room for the new. And that's where a lot of people are also resisting, even just deleting old photos from your phone. Everyone is so attached to holding all of their old photos on their phone. For what? When you
Mm.
clear all of that, then you make space for more new ones. Like it's just basic logic. And in the same way, I make it an effort to like clean my emails, like delete all of my emails, delete all of my photos periodically, so that I start making space for the new. Clean out the closet, throw everything you don't want away, everything that's associating you with the previous version of yourself, right?
Wow, I had never had it explained like that. That's for sure. That was very helpful. To shift gears a little bit here, what is Dharma? Because I know that this is something that you're very passionate about, and you've even created different businesses around just this word Dharma. And so what is this, and how can people look to find this?
Dharma in Hindu philosophy and in Buddhism is something that is sometimes described as the purpose of life, but it's more than just what you're meant to do. It's much more about who you're meant to be. And your dharmic path becomes a path of service to the divine. However, again, we want to clarify that. So your dharma becomes your purpose, but it's not just the purpose for you, it's the purpose for something bigger than you. So as I look at my life, a lot of things that have happened for me, I used to look at them as wow, this happened to me. This was so unfair. And I've had a lot of, as you read my biography, you can see I've had a lot of really big adverse experiences. I was robbed in Argentina and left in the desert to die. I had a near-death experience in Vietnam where I almost got ran over by a truck when I had a motorbike accident. I had a skin disease. I had homelessness. And I used to think all of these things are something that happened to me. And as I started realizing how all of it happened not only for me, but it happened in service of life, this is where Dharma really started making sense for me. It's not so much about what did I get out of these experiences even, which is what a lot of people are reframing it as. It's more what can I give to other people? What can I birth into life, into this existence through the experiences that I've had that are unique to me? So my purpose becomes the purpose that is to bring something into the lives of other people, to be in service, but not just for me. So again, um, just this is my definition of Dharma,
Mhm.
is stepping into who you are meant to be for the highest service.
Yes, I think so many of us, and even myself, are stuck in a place of we are trying to get something as opposed to give. And so, how can you help us reframe that and have that faith to go and be of service to more people or for a higher good as opposed to just trying to get?
Yeah, I would say you're never stuck. You just have to do it. It's really just start doing it and see what happens and watch the miracles that happen in your life as you stop doing things just for you and start doing them for other people. I ran one of my containers for free for over a year now, where I'm doing a lot of group coaching, um, just because it's my job, my divine job, my service, my act of service to give, right? To give from my overflow. So
Mhm.
not to give in the space where it's like exhausting me, but right now in the stage of my life, I'm having amazing one-on-one clients. I'm having amazing containers. I'm doing so many beautiful things in the world. My circles are incredible, taking care of my physical health. So I'm feeling like I'm overflowing, right? And this is not a space where I want to be just like, how can I get more? This is the space where I'm feeling, how can I give? How can I be in service to life? How can I how can I contribute to others' experiences today? So these are the questions that I ask myself. So I created a container where all I did was I did free group coaching for anybody. And it filled up with a lot of like really incredible, amazing people. And it was really highly engaged. And at some point they started asking me like, what are you trying to get out of this? And I told them like at some point maybe this is going to be a business, but this is not why I'm doing it. I'm literally doing it because I have overflow and I want to. And there's nothing to lose when I give. So in order to switch that, I would really just invite you to look at why do you think that you're stuck in the perspective of taking versus giving, when all you need to do is just flip it around and start giving. If you really like doing something, then you would do it for free. So just do it. If you really want to be in service to people, just do it and see what happens. Like you can do that very easily. Just message a couple of people and you can be like, hey, how are you doing? What's happening in your life? And a lot of people go into saying like, hey, I'm doing this and this, these things are going great, these things I'm struggling with. And you can just see like, hey, how can I support you in this? And see the miracles that start happening in your life as you become of service to other people.
That's a really helpful. That's very helpful here. I'm I'm starstruck with so many different aspects that you're able to give, even just for this episode. And for me, this has been very beneficial. Um, and I have a list of questions here. And so the biggest thing for myself right now is how can you find that relationship with yourself that you're looking for?
What kind of relationship are we talking about?
Mm, a deeper sense of self.
Okay. And what does that mean to you?
Hmm. I wasn't ready to take this on personally. Um,
Let me just go take a step back on that
okay,
one.
okay.
So the reason why I ask those questions is because I do get a lot of questions around the relationship to self.
Mhm.
And I think with everything, if you want something, you have to be very clear on what it is. And if you're not clear on what you want, then you're probably not going to get it. But if you are clear on what it is, then you have certain actions to take to get there. And something I do with a lot of clients, not all of them, is I have them write out a certain amount of things in one of the first sessions, that if they were to achieve all of those things in a year or 2 years, their life would be absolutely perfect. Like if I had this and I had this and I had this and I had this, then I would be so happy and my life would be perfect. And then I have them choose one of them that is the most important one, and normally is the one that like really stands out to them. They're like, oh, if I got this, if I had this in order, then that would be, like my life would already be very different. So as they define that one thing, then I just have them go like, what are the things that I need to do every single day for me to be here in a year? And it's often like very doable, but oftentimes we just get so overwhelmed with the things that we feel like we need to be doing that we end up not doing any of them. So you just need to choose one path and then follow certain actions. So as we're talking about a relationship to oneself, I think it's important to know that the relationship that you want needs to be very clearly defined in order for you to have that relationship with yourself. So
Hmm.
as an example, if I want to be more in love with how I show up with certain people, then I have like then I already have like certain steps that I can take, right? If I want to be more aligned with my values, then I already have certain steps that I can take. Am I even clear on what my values are? And then what are the things that I need to do with every single value that are like the levers that are really moving the needle forwards? If I say that I want to be a better coach, then again I have steps to take there, to take me there. Like I can, educate myself or practice more or do more of whatever. So the relationship with self is nurtured the same as any other relationship. You need to know what you want out of it and then kind of figure out the ways to get there. And if I say I want a better relationship with my partner, um, I need to know what that better relationship looks like.
That makes complete sense. So when I look at even like the small doable steps in order to get to achieve what you want and what you want to have, what holds people back from still not necessarily taking those small steps, no matter how small they are?
Yeah, a big one is what we were talking about in the beginning. It's faith. And I think majority of the people that I see don't stick to something long enough to see the result. So there's this really quick transactional consumeristic mentality that is happening right now, which is like I want the result and I want it now. And we're so used to getting everything that we want instantly, right? You go on the Amazon overnight delivery, boom, at your door. You want some food, you look at the Indian restaurant and Uber Eats, and like in 20 minutes it's going to be there. So we're so used to getting things instantly that I think there's a little bit of a lack of patience, and things take time. And if you want a perfect body, if you want to be chiseled and ripped and have that perfect body weight and like perfect muscle to fat ratio and everything else, what you need to do is you need to start taking action and you need to keep taking action. It's not just about taking action, it's about knowing what action to take, taking that action, and then continue to take it every single day or like 4 times a week or
Mhm.
whatever that is. And I think what stops majority of the people is that they don't see the results quickly enough to have faith that things are happening. So another thing that I teach a lot of people is to just start looking for evidence. Like start training your mind to look for evidence that you're moving in the right direction. Because it's so easy to lose trust in yourself when you have big goals and you don't have small milestones. that you look at the big goal and you see like maybe you're still not as close as you want to be, right? And it feels like you haven't taken enough, or nothing is moving quick enough. So it's easy to give up. And when it comes to that, yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is just having small milestones, looking for the evidence that the things are actually working, and then also just keep taking action and like trusting in the process, have faith in the process.
Mhm. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, and myself too. Like that's one of the biggest things where I get stuck is that I take small inspired actions and then don't continue them.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm stuck here because I have so many questions. That's what I was going to ask. How did you get so proficient and good at actually asking such great questions to people?
I mean, whatever questions you ask are going to be exactly the perfect questions that needs to happen in the moment. I have a lot of faith in what I'm learning is exactly what I need to be learning in the moment. And let's put it this way. I have some people around me which are some of the biggest coaches in the world right now. And some of the people that I'm working in very close partnership with, coaching in the private masterminds, they've been voted within the top 10, I think, personal development coaches in the world right now, or 20 or something like that. So when I'm around them, I want to ask all the questions and I want to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, where I'm at in my level of consciousness is only able to receive a certain amount. So the questions that I ask, even if I ask the same question every single year, I'll probably get a different response, or not a different response, but I'll probably receive the same response differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the questions don't matter so much as how you're able to receive the response that you get. And
Mm-hmm.
when you ask certain questions, for me, a lot of things that I ask are based on my understanding, and I'm trying to reach the level of understanding of where I'm at, and then seeing like what's the next step, the next thing that I can learn right now. And I don't need the secrets to the universe. I just
Mm-hmm.
need to know what the next step is. And
Yes.
I've been I've been mentored by this lady called Judith Johnson, who's one of the pioneers in somatics, 83 years old, one of the people who helped Peter Levine publish his books. And she's been on the um, at the field of somatics for a really long time. And I spent a week with her, and I think in 1 week I've learned more with her than I did ever with anyone else. And it came more through transmission because I was asking the right questions and I was listening to the energy of what she was giving me and trying to forget the details about it, but just listening into how can I learn on the energetic level? How can I grasp the concept without fully understanding the details of it?
Mm. And so, what is the biggest catalyst to actually start to change your energy? How can someone start to do that?
I think the physical body is the smallest container.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at our energy body, it's much bigger than our physical body, which is interesting in the yogic philosophy. They kind of flip it around from what we think in the Western space. We think that we are physical body, we are this human being, and then within the human being, we have energy and we have emotions and we have mind. In Hindu philosophy, in the Eastern philosophy, and in the Amazon, they flip that around, which are saying like the physical body is the smallest one. The one that's bigger than the physical is the pranic or the energy body. Beyond that is the emotional, the mental body. And the biggest one of all is what in India, in yogic traditions, they called Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss body or the soul, the Atman. And when we think about the physical body, that's the access to more. So I would say if you can start with physical activity, you can immediately shift your mood. And that has been proven. Like one of the top cures for depression is physical activity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why when you go to a doctor and you tell them that you're depressed, the first thing they're going to ask you is, are you exercising?
Mm.
And it's such a annoying thing to be asked when you're feeling so down and you're feeling so low. And at the same time, it's something that does help. So when I say, like, when we talk about moving the energy, I would say the first thing that you can do is start moving your body. Start moving your body. Then the second thing you can do is start breathing really deep, all the way in the belly, all the way in the chest. Open up, expand, and just let it all out. And keep going like that. And just notice a couple of deep breaths will completely shift your mood, shift your
Mm.
like whole entire energy. And um, majority of the people are taking really slow, really short, shallow, top of the lungs breaths. So if you can switch that, going deep into the belly, expanding as much as you can, deep breaths, that immediately shifts your state. And then a lot of the things in the mind are the pictures that you make in your mind and the words that you say to yourself. So after you've shifted your physiology, you've opened up your body, you've moved your body a little bit, got that energy moving, then you take a couple of really deep breaths, really activate, change that. And then you focus on what are the images in your mind. So visualizing where you want to be and how you want to show up as, and then changing how you speak to yourself in the process as well. So
Mm.
learning how to speak to yourself in the way that's supportive of where you want to go. And if you do those things, your state will completely change. And what you have to do then is learn how to hold that frequency.
That is one of the most challenging things for me is the concept of visualization. And again, it could be something that now that I hear this from you, where I'm not taking enough repetitions to do it. I'll go, I'll do a meditation, I'll do some type of breath work or something. And at times I feel I'm going through the motions of it, but I'm trying very hard to go and visualize who I want to be, how I want to show up, and what I want it to look like. But I don't have that clear picture of what it actually looks like.
Mhm.
Um,
And a lot
go.
of the times, what happens there is to not have enough clarity going into it. And then the second part is having the expectation of what it should look like to visualize. I've seen a lot of that in psychedelic spaces where people come into the ceremonies with plant medicine and they're expecting big visions and they're expecting big transformation. And the expectation of how things should look like is what holds them back from things actually moving forward. Just like wanting a breakthrough is in its essence what is making you not have a breakthrough. So in the same way, the visualization is just be with what is, just allow yourself to be with what imagery is coming, what feelings are coming, and allow yourself to have a different experience than what you think it should look like. Because there's no one that can visualize. We just have different ways of doing it, different ways of experiencing it.
And so that is, again, that leads me to the next thing. I find it difficult for myself and others to allow what is and to surrender and have that experience because I put those expectations on it. And so, again, is that just comes back to that repeated practice of I'm going in with the intention of just allowing this and doing my best to let go of that. And then over time, it becomes easier. Is that like the biggest the biggest thing that you can continue to do?
Probably the answer would be a little bit more intricate, which would
Okay.
be see where your attachments are coming from.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are having a lot of attachments that are not what it looks like. So the attachment to the breakthrough needing to look a certain way is the attachment oftentimes. For example, just wanting the breakthrough is coming from the space of like not feeling worthy without it or not feeling that you're on the right path. So what is behind the attachment of something looking a certain way? If you're, for example, coming back to visualization, if you're wanting to visualize something and you're attached to it looking a certain way, what's going to happen if it doesn't look that way? Like, what's the worst that could happen? And that can start opening the doors to see what are the deeper beliefs behind that. What are the deeper things that you might be afraid of losing, or things that don't feel fully um, in alignment or in service of who you want to be. So I would say in this process, it's a lot of like digging in and seeing what is beneath that.
Hmm. I had not thought of it that way because I most definitely have an attachment to pushing myself to that breakthrough.
Mhm.
That is exactly where I'm at, where I'm trying so hard to have that specific breakthrough, and I want it to look such a certain way. And that's,
Mhm.
but I did not realize that I was attached to that. And so how can we go and identify these different attachments that we have, and what can I or what can everyone do with them?
Yeah, the reason why a lot of people hire a coach is because a coach, if it's a good coach, would help them see what they don't see by themselves. And you can start doing that by just really deeply working on self-inquiry of why you're doing the things that you're doing. And a lot of what is in service of where you want to be and who do you want to be and what is not, and then ask yourself why you're doing the things that are not and why you're not doing the things that are. Because if you just follow doing the things that you know that you should be doing, your life is going to look incredible. However, a lot of people don't, and a lot of people get stuck in not showing up in certain ways or keep repeating the same patterns. And for example, in addiction, like there's going from one addiction to the other or trying to do it all at once and stuff like that, where the path is to just not do it for a day at a time. With the gym, with the physical activity, what it takes is just showing up every single day and doing the exercise, knowing what the exercise is, doing the right exercise, and then like showing up every day or every other day or whatever that looks like for you. um so so with this, where people majority of the time get stuck is just by not doing it, right?
Mhm.
And what you can do to start like seeing where this is coming from is just ask yourself questions of like, why do I keep doing what I'm doing, and why am I not doing what I'm not doing? Just simple inquiry into that.
Mm. It sounds easy. It sounds easier than it is for myself and a lot of people. So, Jacob, I appreciate so much of your time, and this is my favorite podcast that I've ever done. 100%. Like, not taking that lightly at all. Um, where before we get into our last question, because people need to connect with you and find you, uh, what do you have going on right now, and where can we find you to chat with you?
Yeah, my website, jakobgricar.com, which is my first and last name. That's where people can see what my one-on-one offerings are and stuff like that. I'm not doing a lot of one-on-ones at the moment, and I stopped doing retreats for this year because I have something major coming, and depending on where this podcast is coming out, at the end of September 2024, we're launching a 12-week long program, which is going to be the most in-depth thing that I've ever put out. 12 weeks, everyday calls or 6 times a week calls, full accountability, really radical transformation by looking at different areas of one's life. So we're going from looking at changing different patterns to working deep in the process of somatics, looking at the trauma, looking at the environment, really building a solid foundation, starting from that, and then digging deeper and also moving forwards. And it's all happening in the group container. So it's going to be a lot of accountability and a lot of really, really deep work. So this one is called Metamorphosis. And what people can do is just simply shoot me a message either through Instagram or Facebook, or fill out the inquiry form on the website.
That's that's amazing. Our last question comes from our last guest. This is from Estelle in Cubito. So, what is something you wish people knew more about that has helped you?
how important it is to go really deep inside and look at the root causes of everything that is happening. So nothing really is what it looks like. And that's something I keep discovering in myself and the people that I work with. For example, the trigger that you have around a certain person that said a certain thing is merely the symptom of something deeper inside of yourself. The addiction is not the problem, it's the symptom. The illness is not a problem, it's a symptom. So, looking at the deeper parts of you and where things are coming from is way more important than treating the symptoms. So, not treating addiction, not treating illness, not treating the trigger. And a lot of times people ask the wrong question. The question can be like, how can I not be triggered about this one thing? That's not the right question. The right question is why you are triggered about it. Less so what you can do about not being triggered, but more so where is this coming from for you. So something I would really recommend to everyone that is dabbling in personal development, that is on a spiritual path or a personal development path, would be to start looking into somatics, into like deeper work, into like going into the body as a portal to see where are those deeper aspects of the soul.
Wow. I will be listening to this podcast over and over a couple of times. So, Jakob, thank you for coming on today. I am more than thankful here.
Thank you so much for having me, Shawn. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Beautiful.